Hello everyone and welcome to the next top tips for archaeology graduates. Today I'm so excited because Sarah was one of my favourite students when she was at York. We are joined by Sarah. Hi Sarah, how are you today?
I'm all right, how are you?
I'm well. So Sarah did her undergraduate degree in York and then went on to study the Funerary Archaeology Masters with me, and she is now an Assistant Supervisor for Oxford Archaeology. So Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about your role as an Assistant Supervisor? What is the difference then between being an archaeologist and perhaps Assistant Supervisor on site?
So a bit more, so you do a lot more supervising, so you get like a little bit more pressure. They kind of expect for you to like know what you're doing, which most of the time you do. So as a day-to-day assistant supervisor, you kind of have like a group of archaeologists to kind of look over and sort of make sure that they're doing all right, and sort of make sure that they're not destroying the archaeology, and they're recording it properly to like the standard of their sort of our project officers and managers would like, and so that's kind of my day-to-day, is kind of like do the archaeology but also do a little bit extra.
So is there a little bit of people management then as well?
So usually have, as an assistant supervisor, you kind of have between 1 and like 5 people to sort of look at, making sure that they're sort of doing right, and then when you get the sort of, when you get the promotion to supervisor, you get like areas of site to sort of control and look over. So having those assistant supervisors working under you, you can basically get them to do like little bits of that area. So that's basically like my role.
What are some of the things that you enjoy about your role with Oxford Archaeology?
I think it's like different challenges every day. No day is really the same. So you basically have like one day where the sun is shining and it's really nice to dig through like ditches, and we've got a lot of burials at the moment. And then some days it's tipping down with rain and you're having to deal with archaeologists that don't really want to be out in this pouring rain, and you're sort of having to sort of encourage them, and sort of be the sort of the positive atmosphere around. And I suppose that like the challenges with like the weather changing all the time, because we live in Britain, and so like as an archaeologist we're outside, so digging in all weathers is interesting. And having a few years you kind of still don't get used to like the heat waves and then the snow and then the rain and the wind especially. So it's like I really enjoy doing it, and having to sort of look at the different challenges that that certain people may give you. Everyone's different, and so not everyone's going to be on your wavelength, and having to sort of steer into, okay, let's not completely go, okay, let's try and figure out what you're doing wrong, and let's try and tweak it a little bit. So that's kind of, I can see it challenges me.
You do enjoy what challenges you. I think that that's true for a lot of people, that you say this is the hard part, but actually it's also enjoyable because it's great when you have a success at it. And it's interesting to see how various people have said to me when they've been doing these interviews that the weather is the big challenge when they're excavating as well, and I certainly think that's true. Do you get specialist equipment from the company to help you cope with the weather changes?
Yeah, so I mean, the company provides like all of your PPE, so all of your wet weather gear. So we all have like proper, really like Gore-Tex waterproofs that mostly keep you dry. So we have jackets, wellies, trousers, and then if you have like a day where you get drenched and the stuff's not really working, then you ask for a new jacket, new trousers, whatever, and they'll try and like, yeah. And if it's really chucking it down, we tend to go into cabins and do, if you've got any paperwork and stuff, because like if you carry on doing the archaeology, you end up destroying it and doing a lot more damage than just waiting an hour for the rain to get a little bit less. Yeah, so and then the opposite when it's sunny, and so we've just been giving our sort of summer PPE, so it's UV protected and it's a bit thinner, so it's yeah, so you kind of like, they do provide or try and provide as much of that, so you don't have to go out and buy your own because that would be quite expensive. And also like gloves and stuff, so we have like summer gloves and waterproof ones and thermal ones. Thermal ones are really handy in the winter. Yeah, so
that's great. Can I ask next how you got into your role as assistant supervisor? Because I speak to a lot of students who are like, I know what to do to get my first archaeology job, but how do I go about perhaps getting promoted? And I know that you did a special scheme, you did the Graduate Trainee scheme with Oxford Archaeology as well. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so I got the job by ringing and putting my CV in, and they went, yes, when would you like to start? And after that, you're automatically put on the Graduate Trainee scheme at Oxford, where you have basically 6 months with like 4 deadlines, and in each sort of time scale, so every 6 weeks you are sort of taken and you are told what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and stuff to encourage you, but it's also a way of it's guided learning, because you aren't expected to know anything when you start, and yeah, you might know the knowledge of Roman Britain, Roman archaeology, prehistoric archaeology, but actually physically, if somebody said to you, go and dig a ditch slot, I remember my first day and my mind just went, how do I do that? And so like you're given a what we call a graduate trainee mentor, and that person is kind of in charge of you, and you can go and ask them questions at any point. They're usually experienced archaeologists or assistant supervisors, because they've been in the game a little bit longer, and so should know what they're talking about. And so yeah, so they sort of help you begin, and sometimes people get it quickly. I was supposedly one of those. I remember one of my mentor basically coming around in the afternoon one day and went, oh yeah, I forgot to sort of check in on you. That I was like, oh well, that's good, I wasn't worrying you. And then some people need an extra bit of help, so and through the scheme there's also training days where we basically we went into the office and had talks by a lot of the managers and the post-excavation team, where we're sort of given knowledge on specific things. So there was one on photogrammetry, photography, burials, like general finds stuff. There was even one on, had health and safety, HR, and so it was a whole like rounded, trying to sort of see how even like you are that person on site, but having to know what else goes on in the whole of the company, which was really interesting. And then sort of at your 6 months, you are given a pass or fail. Most people pass. And so you sort of then go, you kind of have your like promotion day where you're like, yeah, I'm now an archaeologist. And to be honest, like there's not a lot of difference between like the last couple of weeks of being a GT and being an arch, apart from like they tend to sort of have a bit more like responsibility, because they're now we kind of expect them to know what they're doing because they've been there for 6 months. And then Oxford then started what we call a archaeologist to assistant supervisor scheme, which sort of continues. So you kind of, it's another 6 months to a year, well no, it's a year, where you attend more training days, where they sort of tell you, as an assistant supervisor, this is what you should be knowing and what you should be doing, and you then have to prove that you can do it by having, you basically get this folder and you have to write all of like the sites you've been on, what you've been doing, what responsibilities you've had, and then after a year or so, because some people do take a little bit longer, and they basically look through your folder and say, okay, yeah, or no, you have to do it a little bit longer, and then you're an assistant supervisor, where you're given a little bit more responsibility. And so yeah, as I was saying earlier, you get a little bit more like control over the team, and then you have more opportunities to actually be in charge of different things. Yeah, so that's kind of my progression. And then after where I am, you can then apply to be a supervisor, and then a project officer, and then eventually a project manager. But it's getting that experience through different things, and most importantly writing it down, which I still struggle with. And so basically, because obviously the people that will be end up like promoting you don't see you on a day-to-day basis, and so you kind of need to have the written proof and your basically your continual personal development, and so yeah, to sort of prove that you can do the job and you have been doing the job, sort of alongside that. So yeah, that's kind of where things go in commercial archaeology.
Thank you. That's so useful for you to have spoken through in such detail. We get a lot of questions about how do I get promoted, and what's that progression look like within field archaeology. So we need you to take us through in a lot of detail. I think students listening to this are going to be very grateful for that. And the top tip of writing down your experiences. And I think that goes for everybody, like keeping a record of what you've done, because it's so easy to forget what you've done. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've got into the habit of taking photos of like stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis, so that I can go back and go, okay, so I was in that location and I dug that and that and that, and what I was doing, because I know that I struggle with keeping a continual like diary. So having a sort of, because I have my phone on site with me, so I just take a photo and I know what I've done. So that's another way of another top tip.
Yes, that's a great tip. It's a great tip. Can I ask a little bit then about what you see in the value of your degree? How did your degree prepare you for this role? Perhaps both with specific skills, but also transferable skills as well.
So like obviously your general knowledge through your whole degree is really useful, and actually the one thing I gained, like the knowledge that I gained, really helps you connect with different people, and actually that connection, so you kind of go, oh yes, have you heard about so and so, and you're like, yes, I learned that on my degree, and so having those connections with people has been quite interesting. But actually as like a day-to-day doing obviously like the excavation stuff in undergraduate, the prehistoric to present module was really useful, because I like ever so often I just have like some lecturers in my head going, oh, and I'm like, oh yes, I remember that from years ago. Yeah, and then like through undergrad and masters doing like the leading seminars and lectures and stuff, you really, that sort of audible skills. So actually being able to talk to a room full of people is really useful when, like, as an assistant supervisor, you don't just get to talk to the archaeologists, you have to talk to managers and also consultants and stuff that come around sites. So you know that you have to have that sort of like way of talking that isn't, you have a very different way of talking to those sort of people that definitely was developed through like university. Yeah, so like, and I think there's probably loads of different skills that I probably learned but probably don't think about on a day-to-day basis, like more teamwork and actually like writing skills and stuff, where like on a day-to-day basis you just do it because you've learned it, but actually sitting here I'm like, yes, like I definitely learned that.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Thank you. And then my final question for you is, what advice would you give to students who are keen to work in field archaeology, want to see themselves as an assistant supervisor in a few years? What would you say to them?
I would say just do it. Give it a go, and if you don't like it, then you know you've tried it, and you can go and do something else. But I know, like, I've had people that have come in first day and go, I don't really think this is where I want to be, and are still there like year, 2 years later because they just fell in love with it. And vice versa, we've had people that have done it because they did archaeology at uni, and then they've sort of been there like a few months and gone, actually I've done it, given it a go, like had fun while doing it, but actually this isn't what I want to do. And but yeah, I definitely recommend, if you're even thinking about it, give it a go. And bring a pair of really nice socks. Seriously, like having like 3 or 4 pairs of really thick socks for the winter is really useful.
I love that advice. It's almost Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like, instead of a towel, archaeologists need good socks.
Good socks, yeah.
And the advice to say just do it is brilliant as well. I think that's genuinely inspiring. Thank you, Sarah, so much for taking the time to come and speak to us. Thank you to you for watching. Join us again next time for more top tips for archaeology graduates.